How's it going, people? Sam and Slabby here, and this is the 4th episode of Runescape Lore. Today we'll be giving an overview of what happened during the Second Age. The reason for this is simply there's too much information to cover in one video. So I will be splitting up the different viewpoints of the gods active during this time to give you a detailed description of what happened during the Second Age, but for now we will cover the main major events that took place. There's one thing we need to know first though. During the First Age, Bandos was actually active elsewhere within different realms. He's said to have been wandering through the different realms and eventually discovered Ubiusk, which as we know today is the homeland of goblin kind. Apparently, upon discovering Ubiusk, Bandos forces the inhabitants to worship him and build monuments for him. In response to this, he also taught the goblins metalworking, war, and farming. Later, within his reign, he crossbred goblins and orcs, which results in the creation of the hobgoblin kind. Meanwhile, Bandos builds his army, and then the Second Age came. So the definition of the start of the Second Age is when Guthix fell to sleep. That depicts the end of the First Age and the start of the Second. So, let's get on with it then. The Second Age. So, the Second Age was the dawn of civilization in Gielinor. Those races that were created or brought to Gielinor in the First Age now began to create nomadic settlements, travelling as the hunt and climate dictated. At the same time, it was also an era of great strides, seeing massive kingdoms that have not been rivaled since. The Second Age roughly lasted 2,000 years, and during this time, much happened. Starting with the arrival of the gods. With Guthix asleep, Gielinor attracted the attention of many other divine beings from other worlds and planes of existence. These gods, varying greatly in nature, gained large followings and were able to directly interact with the world of Gielinor. Soon after, the World Gate was said to have been closed. The World Gate was the portal created by Guthix to allow free movement between worlds. It's sealed by an unknown entity during this time. According to the Crystal of Seren book, it happened during the Second Age. This also cut off the elven kind from their additional crystal resources. The founding of Halavale. In the fertile forested region of modern-day Mauritania, the Isian queen, Eferete, and King Acertes arrived from a far-off land. Here, alongside many humans, the Isian built a peaceful kingdom dedicated to Saradomin, one of the gods that recently arrived in Gielinor. Halavale would soon become one of the most prosperous civilizations in the Second Age. Soon after, the Desert Pantheon was established. One of the gods that arrived during this time was Tumegan. He made his home in the Caridian Desert, upon which he met Elidinus, the spirit of the river Elid, and his eventual wife. Their children, Icthlarin and Amascut, were born soon after. Meanwhile, the elves continued to expand their region. The Elvenkind, now a very established and prosperous people, set their sight on exploring the lands east of the impassable mountain range, east of Tiranon, constructing the Arandar mountain route and the underground pass. Many elves decide to travel east where they befriend the gnomes of the Tree Gnome stronghold. Meanwhile, in the Caridian Desert, the Menophites, a tribe of people native to the Carid, began to grow in power in their worship to Tumegan and the ever-growing Desert Pantheon. This led to the erection of many great cities and edifices, the most prosperous of which were the great cities of Ulek and Uza. Soon after, Bandos brings large groups of goblins, ogres, orcs, hobgoblins and orcs from Ubiusk into Gielinor, and begins his war. Soon after, Zaros founds his mighty kingdom. Zaros, one of the many gods to arrive during the Second Age, rallies a humongous following, in the regions that are now known as Asgania, northern Misthalin, the Wilderness, northern Mauritania, and even the Caridian Desert. His people both suffered and prospered under his iron-fisted rule, upon which wiping out many enemy racial and religious forces, and waging war upon all they encountered. The fortress cities of Padewa, Karel, Lhasa, Darekia, Karalanga, Anakal, and Sentistan, and even Gorak were amongst the strongest in the world. It is known that most of the rest of Gielinor belonged to either Saradomin, Armadil, or Seren during this time. Sophanum was founded. Sophanum is founded at the eastern bank of the river Elid throughout the Second Age until the destruction of Uluk in God Wars. The Sophanum remained as a small village. The Caridian and Zerosian Wars began. The expanding Zerosian Empire clashes with the Desert Pantheon settlements. The forces of Zaros were immensely powerful, much more powerful than the Menephites, and therefore the territory of the Pantheon was massively decreased, and Zaros takes claim over the northern part of Caridian Desert. Soon after, Uza Mastaba was constructed. A pharaoh, Queen Senlitan, dies. The Uza Mastaba, one of the oldest surviving human buildings, is constructed to honour her. Soon after this infliction of war from Zaros on the Desert Pantheons, Ictharin, the son of Tumekan, saves the Caridian Desert people from complete rule of Zaros by bringing with him the enslaved Majara, whom he brought from the plain of Runescape. With the help of the Majara, the previously Zaros-controlled areas were retaken. Amascut, the Menethite goddess of rebirth and destruction, becomes warped by her exposure to the Majara brought to Gielinor by Ictharin. She becomes so obsessed with destruction that she begins to destroy her own temples and clergy. Her high priestess, amongst them Neity, exiled, cursing her to never gain a permanent form and unable to exude her full power. Hence why Neity is now the Blue Cat. Tumekan goes into slumber and has a dream. In this dream, Tumekan wanders the Carid for 4 days and nights, each day visiting a different part of the desert, upon which each day Tumekan creates a new godchild. In this way, Het, Krondis, Atmekan, and Scarbrus are born. Sometime during this area, in the northernmost fringes of the Caridian Desert, a massive jewel arena is constructed by an unknown entity. Its purpose and history remain largely unknown. At the same time, a massive castle is built in the northwestern corner of modern Mauritania. It was built by Vigora, Zaros' only human general. Vigora built this massive castle as testament to mankind's ability to serve Zaros. This massive castle can still be found. It's now known as the Slayer Tower. The Majara soon abandoned Ictharin's plight, either because Ictharin tired of their warlike ways, or because the Majara simply escaped. The Majara were freed from his control and were accepted by the Empty Lord, Zaros. Upon which, Zaros, now with the Majara under his control, had become immensely powerful. Most of the other gods in Gielinor at this time immediately formed an alliance amongst themselves. So should Zaros have attacked one of those areas occupied by the other gods and its followers, the other gods would rally against Zaros. The forces of Zaros were so strong that the entirety, or near enough the entirety, of the other gods had to form an alliance to stand up against him. The forces of Zaros, because of this, were no longer strong enough to battle the combined forces of the other gods, and thus the Zerosian encroachment reached its peak, and now stood at a standstill. Meanwhile, Bandos senses signs of an upcoming major war. He reorganizes his followers into an immense army. This is the time when Bandos decides to divide the goblins into 12 different tribes, each led by their own general. He also makes changes to the culture of goblins and possibly other races, so it was almost entirely based on warfare. Hence why you no longer see many peaceful goblins. The finding of the Staff of Armadil. The Staff of Armadil, the massive elder weapon, the God Slayer, a weapon imbued with the power of the god Armadil himself, is discovered in an ancient temple by Valdez, a servant of Saradomin. The staff during this time changes hand a numerous amount of times, eventually falling into the hands of Zamorak, a Marjara general serving under Zaros. Zamorok, now in possession of the staff's godly powers, was able to execute his long-prepared plan. Alongside his allies such as Lord Draken, Thamaron, Enakra, Lucian, and Zamorigal, Vigora and others, Zamorok attacks Zaros within his throne room. During the battle, Zaros trips, impales himself onto the staff, and at the same time, Zamorok grabs the staff, and Zaros' powers were transferred to Zamorok. While Zaros himself faded from existence, this event would mark the beginning of the Third Age. It is possible, as Zamorok is the god of chaos, that this was his plan from the very beginning. Even as Zamorok stood victorious in Zaros' throne room, the gods of Gielinor appeared before him. Though enemies of Zaros, they banish Zamorok for killing one of their own, sending him away from the plane of Gielinor completely. Zamorok, after slaying Zaros, now ascends to godhood, returning shortly after, his followers now prepared to wage war in his name. He never managed to rule completely, however, as the fighting escalated to a full-scale god war, which eventually reached a stalemate and threatened to destroy the entire world. So there we have it, people. That is the major events that took place during the Second Age. The next episode will probably be 4.1, and seeming as the main player during this age was Zaros, I think we must cover Zaros first. It seems only right. So 4.1 will be the story from Zaros' point of view during the Second Age. Should be pretty interesting, and I hope you're all looking forward to it. So with that said, I will catch you all later. Hope you all enjoy. Have a good one.